Good afternoon and welcome to this fifth docent training event of the Swiss Community Historical Society of Bluffton, Pandora, Ohio. This is April 28, 2013, Sunday afternoon, and we are out here at the Swiss homestead.
Okay, we're going to start now by raking the ashes out, and then we're going to, John and I are going to load the bread onto the peel and then insert the bread into the oven.
Do that.
How are you?
Maybe I should get that wheelbarrow.
That works for that.
Might want to put some of that on there first. Putting cornmeal on so it slides on and off a little bit easier.
Slice the loaves.
Bye.
There's some nice forms.
Okay. Okay. Putting them in right on the ashes. There are going to be ashes on the bottom of the loaves, but okay, they're in, and wait for them to bake. They'll start baking. So I want to begin by saying a special thanks to John Rich for supplying the raised loaves that ready to bake in this bake oven demonstration or interpretation this afternoon. And also a special thanks to Keith Summer for his advice and help with my research on bake ovens. I'm going to present this material in 4 parts this afternoon with a brief time for questions after each part. So the first one is going to be just explaining the method of baking in an outdoor bake oven, such as the one here at the Swiss homestead. Secondly, I want to ask who did the baking and what was baked. Thirdly, outdoor bake ovens in the Swiss settlement. And then finally, the outdoor bake oven here at the Swiss homestead. So I want to begin with by explaining something about the method of baking in an outdoor bake oven. First of all, the fire is built inside the oven chamber until the oven chamber is hot, at which time the ashes are removed, as we did just a moment ago. The ashes are removed, and if the bake oven has a damper, the damper is closed to keep the heat from escaping, and then the door is closed as well. We have a stone on top of the chimney here because we don't have this bake oven does not have a damper. So the time needed to create the desired heat in a bake oven is probably an hour to an hour and a half or 2 hours. That's about how long it's been going today. The oven may be preheated the night before, which is what I did last night to help already give some heat to the mass of brick and stone. In an interview of Jim Souter by Keith Summer in 2012, Jim said that his mother could tell when the oven was hot enough by putting her hand in the oven. That's something that requires experience and in order to know how hot the oven is to be. The best wood to use in an outdoor brick oven is hardwood, of course, ash, beech, hickory, oak, at least those 4. because they will provide the hottest fire. So when the ashes are removed, as you saw a moment ago, then the raised bread is placed on a peel, this instrument right here, that seems to come from the Latin pala, meaning spade. It's laid directly on the floor or the hearth of the oven, and then the bread is baked with the residual heat that, in the mass of the oven. There are variables, quite a few variables, but the time needed to bake bread in an outdoor bake oven is not that different from a modern oven, 30 to 40 minutes usually. Jim Suter's mother baked between 4 and 6 loaves of bread at a time. The Lima News article, that some of you may have seen, on March 20, 2013, about pioneer women, reported that Paulina Bixel, who lived in a farm on a farm west of Bluffton, baked up in the early or late 19th and early 20th centuries, baked up to 30 loaves of bread at a time. And finally, most outdoor bake ovens needed a roof extending forward at
and the baker from the rain.
And the candlestick maker?
Do we know what kind of flours they used here? Is it mostly wheat or is it rye, or what kind of bread, in other words, they were using?
I don't know that. Oh, the question is, do we know what kind of flour was used? Was it rye or wheat? And I don't know the answer to that question. If anyone here does, I'd be glad to know. I assume it was wheat, but it wasn't available. I mean, it would have been available at a distance. I don't think there were, at least initially, there were not flour mills in this community, and they had to be brought in.
Do you know if they used corn?
I don't know that. Did they use corn? No, I don't know.
You know, I think I've read of people bringing flour, milled flour from really some distance, whether Lima or even farther.
It was further.
Yeah.
Pickwood, I think.
That's what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure.
So this
Walton Canada had a grist mill and also a sawmill that was funded by the government.
So-
That the Quakers helped with getting started.
so flour was brought in, the comments here, where the flour was brought in from quite a distance, which at that time would have been Lima or Wapakoneta, where there were mills.
I think John Stout had a sawmill in Pandora probably by at least middle to late 1830s, I believe.
A sawmill, not a flour mill.
A flour mill.
A flour mill in Pandora.
Yeah, the top and bottom burrs are at the Hildy home in the main entrance.
Okay, I'll have to look at that next time. Okay, the second area of my research was what was baked and who did the baking. Well, in the 18th and 19th centuries, rolls and bread were the staples of baking. That is, baked goods were staples of family life, and many homesteads and households would have had bake ovens to take care of that need. Who did the baking? Of course, it was the women who did the baking. They would have had help, presumably, in supplying wood for the oven and other things. But it was the women who had the skill to mix the flour and knead the bread and shape the loaves for baking. And it was, as I said a moment ago, it was the women who knew how hot the oven had to be in order to successfully bake loaves of bread in their ovens. Baking usually took place once a week, with quantities to last a whole week. Any questions about that, about the who and the what of baking, or comments or questions?
Would you repeat what you said that was the staple? You said rolls and what?
Rolls and bread.
Oh,
Rolls and bread.
Yeast breads.
Yeast breads, yes.
So, would they have made their own yeast?
Would they have made their own yeast? I presume so. Yes.
Who do that?
They maybe got it from breweries.
Yes, I don't know how they. I
A
don't
lot
know
of people
how.
got yeast was from breweries.
The question was how was the yeast made, and I don't know the answer to that.
Can you make it from hops or not?
That's a flavoring and a preservative.
We do hope to have a session on food.
Yeah, I think we're going to be having a session on foods later on, so we can maybe deal with that question at that time.
Can I answer that one? Or, I don't want to be out of place,
Go ahead.
but you can, I mean, there's natural yeasts all over in the air and everything, and flour itself has natural yeast in it. So all you have to do is take some flour with water and just let it sit, and the yeast in the air and the flour will make it rise, and so you save that, which is your sponge. You know, you can save that from year to year to year. Would be your starter. So I would imagine if they didn't get it from a brewery, they got it just from natural yeast and starting it from flour.
Bake ovens, the outdoor bake ovens in the larger Swiss settlement. There are 5 bake ovens still extant in the Bluffton, Pandora Swiss settlement. The bake oven here at the Swiss homestead is one of these, although it is not at its original location, although I will speak to that in just a little while. But the other 4 are at 4 different locations in the Bluffton, Pandora community. 4 bake ovens in the community are located to the north and south of us. You won't be able to see this very well. This is a map of the Swiss settlement, Pandora and Bluffton communities. We are right here at the Swiss homestead. And so there's one bake oven at 15231 Road 4, which is northeast of Pandora, about a mile. And this is the picture of all of these ovens are in various stages of disintegration. So this is one of them. This is the one north of Pandora on Road 4. It has a rounded dome for the oven. It's not like this one here. You can see here there are places where there used to be shelves. I haven't seen that any other place, but on this one you still have the remnants of a structure for shelves for putting baked goods under the overhang to protect them. You'll notice the heavier limestone in the foundation here, which means that it was quarried deeper inside the stone quarry where the layers are thicker. This is the interior of the oven here. So this is an oven without a damper and with just one chimney. Okay, the second one.
Farm, who lives there?
Richard Geiger lives there. This is the farm known as the Peter Steiner farm, which is now the home of Richard Geiger. The second one is located at 3837 Road Q. So that's located right here on the map, just southeast of Pandora, and that is known as the John S. Steiner farm, now the home of Lawrence Jr. and Betty Amstutz. Road Q, 3837. So here you'll notice, so these pictures right here are, you'll notice it's at it was built at the back of the summer house. So it's not freestanding like these others. Back of the summer house, there's an ash pit hole. You can't see it very clearly here. Right at the center where the ashes drop down into the ash pit, and this is the access from the back of the bake oven to the ash pit. But they could be just, rather than doing it the way I did it a moment ago, they were just pulled into this hole and then they drop down. Likely the bricks for this oven and for probably all the ovens here were made in wooden molds from a nearby source of clay. So this is Road Q. Then the third one is on Bentley Road, 11575 Bentley Road. First of all, I should say Keith Summer dates this oven on Road 4 to the 1890s, and this oven on Road Q to the 1860s, and then this third oven on Bentley Road to the 1870s. That farm is known as the Abraham Bixel Farm and is now the home of Larry and Judy Diller. This one had, although you can't see it, it had a double chimney, and it had a damper. Here you can see the damper plate that was movable, so it could regulate the draft in the chimney. Here you see the detail of brickwork and stone. The interior of the oven. Oh, sorry, I'm at the wrong place here. The brickwork is here. The ash pit, the access to the ash pit is located in the back of this oven here. Right now, the original roof of this it now has a galvanized steel roof over sawed cedar shingles. So that's been there's a galvanized steel roof on the top of that. One thing you might notice here that might be of interest to a visitor, I don't know if it would be, perhaps a mason. There are light and dark bricks. You can see here. You can see the light bricks would have come from a part of the kiln which was less hot, and it's a softer brick. And then the darker, or these darker bricks are a harder brick from the hottest part of the kiln. And then the fourth bake oven is located south of Bluffton on Schifferly Road, at the intersection of Bentley Road and Schifferly Road. It's in the northeast quadrant of that intersection. So if you're driving down Bentley at Schifferly, and if you look to your left, you will see an abandoned farm. And if you turn onto Schifferly Road, you can see the oven. It's located on the Howard Rickley Farm. But it's owned now. It's abandoned, but it's owned by Sherm Wilkins. This oven also has a double chimney. Here you can actually see it. You can take a closer look later. A double chimney on here, also with a damper. So both of these last two have had and have double chimneys with a damper. This was renovated in the 60s or 70s and plastered probably at that time. So the plaster is new, not original. Keith interviewed Sherm Wilkins last year or sometime fairly recently, this is oral history here. He Sherm Wilkins quoted his father as saying that there was an Enoch and Peter Chandler father-son team after the Civil War who built outdoor bake ovens in the Orange and Richland townships. So that's interesting detail. So let me just stop there with these four ovens in the in the community? Are there any questions that come to mind?
I've got two. You didn't say how old the Shifley oven is.
How old the Schifferle oven is?
Shifley Road oven.
And I don't have that. Maybe, I don't know, Keith, could I ask you for an estimate?
I'm guessing late 1860 to 1870, somewhere in there, possibly.
And are any of the other four, besides ours, are any of the other four in use at all?
So the question is, are any of the other 4 bake ovens in use? And the answer is no, they are not. They're all falling apart.
They're not in usable condition.
No. Some of them might be with a little bit of work, but no, not now.
I have photo documentation of a third bake oven that had dual chimneys, and that was at Richland Center, or the Gratz Crossing, where you go over the overpass, and then the farm that the libraries used to own there on the west side, there was a bake oven there with dual chimneys. At one time I have a photograph of that one.
It's gone.
On, yeah.
Okay, are there other questions?
What's the
about?
purpose of a dual chimney? Why is that significant versus a single chimney versus no chimney with the big oven?
I don't really know that. Keith might be able to tell us about
In
that.
discussing this with other people, our best guess is it gives you a more even heat in the chamber, baking
Because of flow
chamber.
of heat?
Because you have the flue going both ways, exhausting instead of just one direction.
In this oven here, the heat is more towards the back. The front is less hot than the back of the oven.
Got a good enough reason? I don't know. I mean, that's one of those things that's kind of hard to pin down, but that's our best guess.
Okay, let me then say a little bit about the outdoor bake oven here at the Swiss homestead that you can see by looking over here. The original bake oven here at the Swiss homestead was not located in this position. It was located about 15 feet or so west of this workshop, southwest of the house, just adjacent to or about where the windmill is. That's where the original bake oven was. That's something that people might, visitors might ask, is about what was it originally here. So it was not, it was over there. The current bake oven that you see here was moved from the John Amstutz. He was called Wagner Stutz because he was a wagon maker. The John Amstutz farm, located across from, it's on Augsburger Road, across from Maple Crest and what is now called Willow Ridge. Right at those buildings there was a farm, and that bake oven was located there at that farm, and it was moved in the mid-70s, 1970s. It was moved here to this homestead. The Bluffton Stone Company moved the oven from the Amstutz farm, and Ed Coley, with a crew of bricklayers, rebuilt the oven at the present location. And one of the bricks was found to have a print of a paw of a dog in it, and they put that brick at the front right where I was taking out the ashes, and that's not where it originally was, but as a kind of item of interest for where it can be easily seen.
This is the farm that we would have known as Wilhelm Amstutz farm?
Yes.
When we were kids.
It was the Wilhelm Amstutz farm. Or I said John Amstutz,
And who moved
That
it?
would have been his grandfather.
his grandfather, yes. The Bluffton Stone Company moved it. And then bricklayers reassembled it here at this site. And in talking with Keith, I'm not sure if it was taken, if it was completely disassembled, every single brick numbered, or whether it came in some larger parts. It was maybe completely disassembled and then reassembled here.
It was, when they brought it here, it was sort of in sections or whatever from picking it up.
Yeah.
And when they set it down, things sort of fall apart, but Ed and his crew cleaned up all the bricks and then relaid them, but they didn't number them. Ed had dimensions and photographs of the bake oven to guide him in rebuilding it.
Okay. Oven may have come from the von Gunten brickyard in Bluffton, which was located across from the Bluffton Dairy Freeze. It's across Bentley Road, across State Route 103 to the southwest, right in that corner there. But it has the present house has a Main Street, a South Main Street address, 615 South Main Street. There was a brickyard there, and these bricks may have been made there. Rachel remembers the optometrist here in Bluffton, Dr. Bixel, who used to live in the house near the location, that same location of the brickyard. The date of this outdoor bake oven is probably 1860 or 1870s, 60s or 70s. It has, as we pointed out earlier, it has access to, there's an ash pit and there's an access in the back, but there's no place in the oven where you can drop the ashes down. So when they rebuilt that here, their plan, they didn't have a clear idea about how to do that, so they just closed it up. So there's no access to that.
I'm guessing they didn't know one existed.
They didn't know it.
Yeah, that's my best guess.
You'll notice here on this Bentley Road, the ash pit has a lintel, a stone lintel there, limestone lintel, and I noticed that this one has the same thing. It has a limestone lintel all over the top of that.
What's a lintel?
Basically a supporting an opening.
Yeah, on top of which you could lay stone or brick on top of that lintel.
So it doesn't cave in that spot.
Excuse me?
So it doesn't cave in that
Yeah,
spot.
so it does, the lintel is so it doesn't cave in over the door. Any questions about this bake oven here that I haven't covered that might be of interest to visitors coming here?
Okay, why are the shingles standing up above the line at the top of the roof?
Well, why are the shingles standing up on the line of the roof rather than somehow a more finished line at the top?
When you're laying up a shingle roof like that, that is the way it is finished. You lay the top. When you're laying a shingle roof up like that, you always determine where the prevailing wind comes from, and that top course of shingles always extends above the peak of the roof to help protect water from going down inside there. This was done before they put a metal cap on top of there. Sometimes they did that, but this is a proper way to finish a wood shingle roof.
So what you're saying is that this is the way it was. Shingle roofs were finished in the 19th century.
Well, and 20th century too.
Even now.
Oh yes. I mean, the old timers did that way. Now a modern carpenter might not do that, but traditionally that's the way you would do it.
And I will invite Phil Kingsley to lead that part of the presentation.
Okay, we're going to start outside here. The workshop is behind us, and I'm basically going to ask some questions of Keith Summer and Jeff Althouse, who are here with me right here. We're going to start with some questions to Keith Summer about the origins of this workshop. And I'd like to first ask him, what do we know about when it was built, and how do we know that? And then move on to a quick question, I think, about whether this is the original location of this workshop. Did this happen to have been moved in here from somewhere else or not? And was the building heated? Those are a few of the questions about the workshop and its origins that Keith could respond to, please.
Okay, now you want to refer to the whole building properly, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, what I should say to begin with, this is a two-stage building project. This part of the building was built probably, I'm guessing, the way it looks as far as the size of the timber is concerned, probably in the 1860s possibly. And this is a timber frame building, It is all mortised and tenon together. The framework is not nailed together with nails. They use wooden pins and mortise and tenon joinery. The other part over here was built later, I'm guessing somewhere in the 1870s, because we have siding here, which is pine siding, which is not native to around here, and it was milled in a wood mill. And by the early 1870s, railroad went through Bluffton, about 1872, I think. So that would have been the earliest they would have been able to have pine siding like this. And there was machinery already in the 1870s that could make this kind of siding. Originally, the roof on here would have probably, if it was built in the 1860s, it would have had the wooden shakes, which would have been about this long, which were split out of white oak and finished with a draw knife. This part over here probably had shingles on it, were made in a local sawmill. As early as 1871, we know for sure there were 2 shingle mills in Richland Township which were making shingles by machine. So this probably had oak sawed shingles on there. They did not have cedar shingles at this time. That was later towards the 20th century when cedar shingles came into being, which were shipped from out of this region.
This is where the building would have been built
As
originally?
far as I know, every indication it was at this location, and then this building was built onto it.
What else we need to do on there?
I'll just say mainly the stone probably came from the local stone quarry here, either in the creek or the later stone quarry over there where Russell Suiters used to be, which I call the #2 Schumacher stone quarry.
I have a question that I've been asked a couple times as a docent. I want to know about the door.
Okay, the door is not original. Originally there would have been 2 doors here, 2 hinged swinging doors here originally. This is a later door, probably from 1890s or sometime, possibly, was put in here. Originally, when these older buildings were built, they did not have sliding doors. Just an example, all the sliding doors you see in the barn out there never were there originally. Those were all hinged doors in the barn, also in the hog shed area. So sliding doors didn't come in until later in the 19th century.
Okay, we want to move along to talk about the use of this building and the role it played in a farmstead like this. And I think we can do that inside, so why don't we move inside? What was the function of a building like this in the early life of a farmstead? And by the way, you might also comment on what they called this building. Keith?
From some of the research I'd done on historic buildings, they would not have called this a shop. They probably would have called it a tool house. Might come as a shock to you. Different stages as far as historic farms evolved. You know, people call the same buildings different things. Today you call it a shop. Back then you probably would have called it a tool house. And it wouldn't have been just for shop tools. You would have kept your tools in here for gardening also. And some of your things like probably size, which you would need to help maintain those in a tool house like this, as far as sharpening the blades, tightening things up. You'd bring those in here to work on also. It wouldn't have been just woodworking going on in here. There would be a limited amount of metal work. As far as I know, they didn't have any forge in here, although we do have some forging equipment in here. But probably the biggest thing that went in here was probably woodworking. There is evidence that Peter Schumacher did build some furniture. We have that secretary in there that he supposedly built. We also have a Empire-style chest of drawers that there's a note inside that said that he built it. And also in his inventory of tools, it said he had a fairly complete set of joiner's tools, which doesn't mean anything to anybody in modern days, but basically that's the kind of tools that be used for making furniture, cabinets, and that sort of thing. And also they would have tools in here that would have been used for building these buildings also. As well as just doing odds and ends, like we have some leather working equipment in here, basically for working on repairing shoes, boots, harness. That's what this equipment is right here, for instance. We don't have any stoneworking tools in here, but eventually we want to have a set of stoneworking tools in here because there's a lot of stonework went on here on the farm also, as far as the building these buildings and for maybe doing mason repairs or whatever.
So who would have been the main people who worked in here? You mentioned
Basically, the men would have been working in here, yeah. I should also say that this was a heated building. We have a stovepipe pole up here. There was a brick chimney up there that we tore out, and that would be another nice thing to replicate sometime. And also this would have been the original man cave. Rainy day or whatever, they'd be out here working on stuff. So this would be sort of a man cave. You know, you got your heat here, and you know, the sons would be here, or maybe some other relatives, maybe Peter Schumacher's, some of his relatives from the next farm might come over here on a rainy day and do whatever.
Would this have been a fairly typical Swiss settlement workshop, or tool?
I would say so, yes. Yeah, it's fairly typical, yes.
There's nothing that's particularly unusual about this.
No. From what I've talked to other old timers, every farm shop had a schnitzelbank for sure, and usually a pub-a-bank or a shaving bench, and more than likely some kind of a lathe. Not everywhere, but it depends on how mechanically inclined the farmer and his family were, but a lot of them made a lot of things for their own use, especially if it was made out of wood, types of things. Because they had plenty of wood. Every farm had a wood lot, which they would depend on not only for firewood, but for making things. The old saying goes is, take care of your wood lot and it'll take care of you.
As far as we know, was this ever used as a business, as a site for a business? Or did it support, there was a quarry and a sawmill.
The sawmill business basically was over at John Schumacher, so if there was any business records or whatever, it would have been over at John Schumacher's place. But there was a later, the stone quarry was sort of a sideline business also, from my understanding. So yeah, they could have kept some records here for that part of the business also.
But it never functioned as an actual business, a site where
not that I know
people came and bought things or whatever?
No.
Were there some shops in the settlement?
Yes, absolutely.
Did that?
Where I live is a case in point. Where I live was owned by the Geiger family, or the Geigers first settled in this community, and they had a shop that was very well equipped. They even had a loafing area there. They had a corner where there was an L-shaped bench mounted probably to about 10 feet. Going around the corner, there was a clock there, there's a place to hang up your coats and hats, and there was a stove there. And on the opposite wall it says, this certain brand of riding harrow for sale here, stenciled on the wall in ink. So obviously they were dealers in at least this one piece of farm machinery. Plus they did have a sawmill also. And they had a general shop for doing woodworking and other metalworking. Then you had another room that was plastered for doing blacksmithing. So I'm fairly sure they did custom work for people there on a regular basis.
But that was not here.
No, this is where I live. Yeah, where I live. And that's an older shop. That was about 1850s shop.
Question. Yeah. But you're saying that this one was probably built the first part was built in the 1860s.
At the earliest, probably, judging the size of the timbers in there. And these timbers in here were not sawed on a Schumacher sawmill. They were sawed on a later sawmill because the lumber that is sawed on there is sawed on a circular saw. And by 1860s, the up and down sawmills were not in use anymore, and the steam-powered sawmills with the circular blades were in common use.
So maybe it's completely speculation on what they would have done in the period before that. Like this house was built, isn't that the early 1840s we're talking about?
The house?
The house was 1843.
Yeah.
Now, what they might have done for a shop, maybe in the interim, is use the log house for a shop also. Because a lot of times, after you build the main house, and nobody lived in the first generation house or log house, then they used that for various other things. This is just speculation, and this is going on what other people's experiences are in other communities or other farms in this community, that sort of thing can happen. For instance, at the old house place, Jeff's ancestors, that log house is still there yet, but it's used for just sort of miscellaneous things after the main house was built.
Other questions at this point? What I'd like to do is to move along and talk and have Jeff talk a little bit about the restoration process. But if there are questions about how the building was built and its origins and so on.
What's the difference? How are these two buildings used? I mean, because this is obviously a separate building from that building.
Yeah,
It
I'm not
started
really-
there as the workshop, and then they built a better one, or?
If there was used for a workshop, it had no wood floor in it because none of the framing indicates that there was a wood floor in there originally. So you could have had a wood shop or workshop without a wood floor in like we have in, but it isn't real likely. So that's why I'm sort of guessing they might have used the log house for a workshop.
So we're not sure what that was used for?
What about
we're not
carriage
really sure. It could have been used as this for keeping tools in like you'd use for the garden and other farm tools in. I don't know that they kept these things in here. That I'm not sure. That's sort of a mystery that I haven't really solved in my own mind.
Would they have kept a sleigh or a wagon or something like that in there? Kind of like our modern day garage?
Probably not. They would have kept one wagon probably in the hog house over there in the one driveway. There was a through driveway in the hog house, and you would have kept at least one or two wagons in there and another wagon upstairs in the barn. You would not have any wagons downstairs in the barn because all you had was stable doors in the downstairs of the barn, which were not big enough to bring a wagon into.
Okay, this farm though had a sleigh too, right?
Yeah, it was probably, if they didn't have this, they would have had a bobsled, and that would have been probably kept in the barn.
But the floor on that part of the building is even with the ground.
Right,
So you'd think they'd drive something in here or push something in here because of that.
yeah,
But we just don't know exactly why they used it.
But for buggies, you don't think that this
Yeah,
was?
you could have, yeah, yeah, you could have.
I was gonna
Any other
guess.
questions? Let's move along quickly and have Jeff, who was the project manager for the restoration of this building, tell us a little bit about that process. Can you, yeah, move over here. Can you just tell us a bit about when and by whom the work was done in restoring this building?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, we had Amos Swartz and his crew come from Indiana. They worked on this probably for the better part of 4 months. One of the main problems was this building was racked or leaning to the northeast pretty bad. So we had to bring a tractor in here, they anchored to that, and started pulling off siding and some of the interior boards at the lower, about 30 inches up from the floor in here, so that they could pull on the tractor to pull this building back over as straight as we could get it. It's not perfect, but it's close. The second problem was the foundation was really bad. So they jacked the building up. Once it was straight, they tore out all the old foundation and we put in a new flagstone foundation. The floor was ripped out at that time so that it could jack it up. And one of the things we found out about the floor was the center sill beam is not tied to the outer sills in any way or to the foundation. It's a floating sill beam in here, and it sits on 3 flagstone pillars. Now, when we tore the floor out, this floor was not really good to start with from age and weather and so forth. So we had to find some donor flooring. Seth found that down at, I think it was Westminster, Ohio, a house that was being torn down. It was the same vintage or same age about. So we went down there, I think 3 different times and tore floor out and brought that in here. And Amos's crew done a really nice job of blending all that in, getting it back the way it probably looked at that time. We had new windows and sashes, everything put in at that time, except for this one. I think that's the only one we didn't do. And another thing, when they tore off this wall boards in here at the bottom, some of these walls have writing, signatures, dates on. We had to make sure all those went back in exactly the way they came back out. We had Schumacher Sawmill from Scott's Crossing. They sawed the lumber for us, all new sill plates in here. The studding was rotted off, that's why the building had to be jacked up and supported, and new lumber had to be scabbed onto all the studs, or most of them anyways, to reconnect to the sill plates. All that stuff come from Schumacher's.
Most of that new lumber is not visible anymore, though.
No,
In the walls or in the...
Yeah, all that stuff is hidden, you won't be able to see that.
That was all white oak, right?
Yes. But Amos's crew done a really great job of I didn't think they'd be able to straighten as much as they did. They got it as close as anybody's gonna get it, I guess.
Is there anything that we've found out about the building that we didn't know before from doing the restoration?
Well,
I guess
I think
the fact
one-
that the sills were not connected to the joist is one thing, but what else? Anything else?
Well, I'll make one comment. This building is in better condition. It's better shape than when it was built. It was sort of slopped together.
Yeah, it was
It was nailed together. This building has no bracing in it at all. Now that part over there has what we call knee braces in the corners and other places on the posts for bracing the building. This has no bracing in here. That's one of the reasons it's sort of racked and moved around, because there wasn't any bracing in this building to hold it together. There is some metal bracing inside the walls now to help rectify that situation.
Why would they have built it with no bracing originally?
That's the way they built things, a lot of things in that time period without any bracing. They didn't build the later buildings as good as the earlier buildings.
Well, another thing, this part of the building is not exactly square the way it was built either. We were a little concerned about how we were gonna put this foundation back in. Were we gonna try to pull the building one direction or another? And we finally come to the conclusion with Keith and Seth and I that it probably was built that way. It was never perfectly square to start with, so. Not all those old carpenters were the best, but, and it might have been built in a hurry. It might have been secondhand lumber. It's hard to tell, where this come from.
Were the windows this big?
Yes.
The original ones?
Yes. The idea is here to let natural light in here so you can work on it. Yeah. The one shop I have at home also has some double windows on one side, and it's probably the area where they have the wood lathe where you need to have good light to do your work.
This side of the building took a lot of weather. The flooring was worst over here where rain had leaked in. The studs on the outside, or when we pulled the outside siding off, when we got to the stud work where it fastened to the sills, it was gone. The only thing holding it up was these interior boards and the siding on the outside. When they got the tearing stuff off, they had to support this corner right away. So it was, it's one of the projects you want to try to do it right. You want to make it look period or the way it was when it was built. And we done our best. That was one reason why we didn't put a new floor down in here. We scavenged flooring from another house to put back in here to give it that old look again. But
Are those windows period windows or modern?
they were handmade out in Indiana by an Amish crew, I think it was.
But they're period style buttons on there, and I think they're white oak too, aren't they?
Yes.
So another question I have is, once you straightened, or the workers straightened out the building, how did they keep it straight?
Well, they come in here and they fasten bracing on the inside of the building.
I see.
There was boards running at an angle
All over the place.
all over the place. And you came in here and looked at it, and you just thought, what the heck are they doing here? But until you could get all the studs refastened to the new sill plate, there was nothing to hold it from going one way or another. We actually went through a little bit of a windstorm that period of time. I was afraid to even come back over here the next morning, but it never moved. It was fine.
If you open that door up there, you can see some of the metal bracing that...
With those windows in there, you know, that takes away a little bit of the strength as far as keeping that building. I mean, that's probably one of the only things you'll see that was done here that's not period construction.
How about those?
I think they had shelves up there at one time, suspended shelves.
Boards across on top of those.
The fence up there, that's modern also, that's something that hasn't been taken out yet, that needs to come out. One thing this shop doesn't have much of is tool racks. In my shop at home, I have enough tool racks in there that are original with the shop to put at least 200 tools in there.
The one thing that didn't get done when we were here working on this building is getting that sliding door off that Keith talked about earlier. We've got the lumber laying in here to make 2 hinge doors to put back in there to make that more correct.
Does someone want to comment on the floor in this part of the building? Is that original?
No.
No.
Seth Bix will pick that flooring up, and I'm not sure where that came from.
Some of it come from the quarry also.
Yeah, that's from Bluffton Stone.
That's what I thought.
We laid that in there, keep things a little bit drier, we hope, although it looks damp today.
Mostly that was a dirt floor originally from what we can tell.
Noticed the ceiling is flat here. Did they have like an attic up here?
There is an attic up there.
That they, for throwing lumber or
Yes.
stuff up there?
How do you get to it? Where's
If you go outside and look, you can see there's no wall on that side of the,
Yeah.
so there's quite a lot of space up there.
And actually, through the reconstruction of the house and this building, we did use some of that lumber up there.
At one time in this building's history, they also had chickens up there. Yeah, there's a brooder up there, there's a lot of chicken manure up there. And we cleaned the place up.
Okay, maybe we could take a few minutes to look at some of the tools and implements that are in here. We have to wait for a minute.
It says William
I'm sorry?
Schwab. Schwab. See, it's good to get that too. Yeah.
What's the date there?
Can you read it?
See a date.
Yeah.
Well,
It's the ARR.
19, is it 15?
Okay.
1916.
Could be. The one over here is 1915, so it must be.
Because the windows are
A variety of tools. The most prominent one is a tool called a flax brake. And a lot of farmers did raise flax for a certain thing. Does anybody know what flax was raised for? Right. Okay, in the process of preparing it for spinning.
Maybe we should just clarify, make sure that answer was audible on the,
Yeah,
what is flax for?
Linen.
correct. A lot of things that are called linen nowadays aren't really linen also, which a lot of people don't understand, but anyway, in the raising of linen after it was harvested, you would soak the stalks in water to soften it up, and then you would put the stalks through this flax brake and break the stalks up so you could open up the insides and get the fibers out from the inside of the stalks for doing the spinning. So that's basically what the flax brake is all about. It's part of the linen making process.
You've got some metalworking tools over here. Comment on those, please.
Basically, we have a blacksmith style anvil here. This was made in Dudley, England in the 1850s. This was out of Peter Bixel Jr.'s blacksmith shop, which is 2 farms south of Ebenezer Church on the west side. The other tools are from other places. This is basically a blacksmith style hammer as opposed to a carpenter's hoe hammer. This tool here is a hardy or cut off for cutting off metal, usually hot metal. That's probably about 140 or 50 pound anvil. This company made probably more anvils than any other manufacturer in the world. They literally imported thousands of them into this country between probably the 1840s up until probably the 1920s. They were importing anvils into this country. This is a 3-piece anvil. You have a bottom piece right here of wrought iron. You have another top piece of wrought iron here that are welded together here with a fire weld. And then there's a piece of tool steel welded on the top up here. So this surface up here is real hard. It's been heat treated. Back there, we have two vices back there. Those are blacksmith vices or leg vices. And I think one of them came from where Clifton Diller used to live, and the other one came from the Suter place where Bob's ancestors lived.
What about the one stone tool back there?
Okay. This is the only stone tool we have in the shop. Society owns, I think, one or two other ones, but this is not a mason's tool, although it's a stone working tool. This is a stone tool, working tool called a mill pick, and its job is to dress the grooves in a burr stone that would be used for grinding flour. This is very typical of mill picks for dressing burr stones.
The handle is courtesy Jason Althouse on the Schnitzelbank. Do you want to comment on the Schnitzelbank over here? Move on to our...
It was used in practically every farm shop had one in the early period. I remember Leland Gerber telling me, I'm sure most of you knew Leland Gerber, he grew up where I lived, and he said, you know, when they grew up there was a Schnitzelbank in the shop, and this was in the teens and early 20s.
Sit down and
So,
demonstrate.
I was going to say, we
so basically, this is a Germanic style of Schnitzelbank. The English and the British have a different style of Schnitzelbank from this. Basically, we use it for making these types of things. This is a ladder rung from Bob Basinger farm. This would have been made on a Schnitzelbank, which is for using what they throw for splitting. We have a foot pedal down here, and there are different holes. I don't know if this one does or not, but usually there's different holes in this piece coming up through here, so you can adjust it for different sizes of work. Basically, the main tool is a draw knife, and also sometimes a spoke shave, which is a shorter tool than this, and you basically draw the tool towards you when you're using it. And it's a good idea sometimes to have a little protector thing here called a breast bib in case you run up here too hard and you could cut yourself. Watch what you're doing. And of course, these things work best when they're razor sharp.
Let's move on to the fro and comment on that if you would.
Okay, this is another tool that was used in a lot of the earlier buildings for doing a variety of things, and this is probably set up here for doing something like you'd use for splitting shingles. You also use it for making, you'd split out pieces like this sometimes before you'd finish them on a draw knife. Behind Jan there is some other items that were split with a fro. Here is plaster lath. This is a stave from inside of a house wall for holding the infill or the clay and daub insulation. Would have been split using one of those from a big chunk of wood. Here we have legs on a milk stool, and those would have been split out that way also. After the shingles were split, they were smoothed up with the draw knife. This is a finished shake. The modern shakes you buy in the lumber yard or whatever are not finished like this. They're still left in the rough. Therefore, they will not lay properly and shed the water like an old-fashioned shake would have shed the water. And this would be white oak. The modern ones you buy are cedar. This is a cedar modern shake. This is a modern shake that I finished with a draw knife. So you can tell the big difference between what I call a finished shake and an unfinished one.
Keith, shake.
And the way these are so uneven, you can see why they don't shed water properly. Or they would want to make cuts to that line. And on a large timber, they would be standing on top of a log like this, and you have a crew with axes, felling axes. A felling axe is an axe you use for felling a tree, cutting things up, as opposed to a hewing axe or a broad axe. So these fellows on top of the log here are juggling or cutting out big chunks of wood up to a chalk line which is snapped on that log. Then after that, a lot of that wood is cut out on this log. Then another person comes along with a broad axe and finishes up the squaring. You can't see this person very well, but you might want to look at that later. But there's a person down here on the ground, not up on the log, with the broad axe finishing the squaring off process. And basically the squaring off process, you do not swing this thing like you would a regular axe like this. You have one hand up here and the other one back here, and this side here goes up against the log. A broad axe is shaped like a wood chisel edge. Can you see the bevel on the wood chisel and the bevel on the axe? So basically, the broad axe acts as a giant wood chisel, in effect.
Point out how the handle is offset.
And the handle is offset so you don't spin this one here that Phil's just pulling out. This is from Wilhelm Amstutz, which was probably used by his grandfather, John Amstutz Sr. or Wagner Stutz. And this one here we think actually might have been used here. The people who donated it to us were Mrs. Zissler, was a descendant of the Schumacher family, and they say it came down through the Schumacher family, so there's a good chance that this broad axe actually had been used here before by the Schumachers.
Would you want to comment on planes a little bit?
Okay, we do have a variety of planes here, not as many as we have a group of planes down below here that are in the category of what we call bench planes. We have some smaller planes here. These are basically smoothing planes for finishing up work after you've used a rougher plane, after you use a plane like this for called a jack plane. This is for doing a lot of your rough work. Then we have a longer plane in here. This is a joiner plane. This is for doing very fine work. Let's say you're making a tabletop and you want to match boards together so you have a really tight fit. You would use a plane like this to level off all the little irregularities so you can get a nice fit for the boards to butt up against each other.
Turn that over so you can see the bottom.
Pardon me?
Show the blade on the bottom.
The blade is steel.
Yeah, these are, well, yes and no. Part of the blade is steel and part of it is wrought iron. And the reason for that is when they were making these tools, wrought iron was cheap, carbon or tool steel was expensive, so they would weld on a cutting edge to a wrought iron blade made out of carbon steel because it was more economical to do it that way. So it's actually a bimetal or two pieces of metal to make that cutting edge and blade, which extends all the way up to here. The reason it's battered up right here is from adjusting the plane. You're tapping the blade down to get the amount that protrudes down here to do the cutting.
It's held in by a wedge.
Yeah, this wooden wedge holds it in right here. These kind of planes were made up into the early 20th century. The reason I know that, I have catalogs at home that show these being made up into at least the 1920s. Yeah. So these planes were made over a long period of time.
Are there some specialized planes that you want to demonstrate here?
Yeah. Now we have some decorative things in the house and outside the house. On the outside of the house we have wooden trim like this. And if you notice, it has a decorative effect right here on this corner. And this is a bead and cork molding. We have this kind of decoration on the trim around the doors and the windows on the outside and inside, plus on the front porch. And we have this kind of decoration in the house downstairs on the ceiling beams or joists. Now, you'll ask, how was this made? They used a plane like this called a beading plane. And these are made in several sizes. And this is the size appropriate for making this actual molding on this piece of window trim. It fits right on there like that. In this situation, you have to run it one way and then you have to turn it around and run it the other way. If you ever go inside the house and look in southeast corner, downstairs and upstairs, there's a walnut that boxes in refrigeration lines and other things, and that has a corner bead on it, and I used one of these planes to make that corner bead. So this is how all the trim in the house was made. And if you look at the ceiling of the house, and also the board and batten doors, you'll see the little decorative effect on all the joints where the boards come together. Okay, now what they used there was another plane, the same kind of a plane, only a smaller plane. This is a beading plane also for just a smaller bead. This is about a 3/16 inch bead. So all the ceiling boards in the house for the second story and the attic floor and all the board and batten doors were all beaded with one of these planes. So you can imagine the enormous amount of handwork involved in just doing all that decorative effect on all those boards for the doors and the ceiling. Now here's another thing about a lot of the work that took place in the house, and that had to do with the flooring and the boards also. We have tongue and groove joinery. Now you couldn't go run to the lumber yard and get a bunch of this stuff already cut. So you had to do it yourself, and what you did, we used a pair of planes like this. And one is for making a tongue, and this is for making a groove. These are called matching planes. And they made pairs of these and for the different sizes of thickness for whatever sizes of boards you were working with. This is for, I think, 3/4 inch thick boards right here. So that's another tremendous amount of work that was done just making the tongue and grooves for the board and batten doors and for all the ceiling and floorboards. That's typical of this floor in here also. I don't have a plane here for window sash, but they use a special plane for window sash also, and eventually we'll have what we call a sash plane here that was making all these shapes here and these buttons on the window sash. So that's all handwork.
Could you explain the boring machine and making mortises? And,
yeah.
Then I think we may take a look at the lathe and call it a halt.
This tool is called a boring machine. It was invented in the 1850s. This is a little bit more modern version. The original versions had more of a wooden frame instead of a cast iron frame. This is basically for boring holes, your rectangular and square slots where you have tongues going into the framework. This would speed up things considerably from using the T-handled augers which were used earlier.
This lathe came to us it was donated by John Moser, and it was his great-grandfather, I believe, who made it, who was also named John Moser. It would have been built in, Keith, do you think this is 1860s or so?
I would say so, yeah. Now the thing at the end there does not belong to that. That was Ezra, John's father, put that on there just for convenience. That's actually a metal shear. It's a blacksmithing tool at the other end.
There's metal work here that probably he didn't make. John, loosen it up, move it back. You would loosen this, then you can slide this tailstock back and take out what you're working on. There's a small adjustment, but you need some kind of a wrench to push this point in a little tighter.
So you could bring it all the way down here and have.
Yep, you could make a porch post almost out of it if you brought the tailstock clear down there and had a long piece of wood. The flywheel was probably came off a binder, grain binder. It works perfectly for this.
Phil, was this also the minister, John Moser?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also a gunsmith?
Minister and gunsmith, and
his picture's in the first church, if you want to see him. First time.
anything else about the lathe?
I think you covered pretty well, Al.
You've made a couple things for us here.
Well, working on a couple of things. There's a potato masher in the process up there is so large that it's taking me quite a few fall festivals to get it down to this side. Get it down to this side. That's good. That's
The original Schumacher sawmill was probably about a quarter mile south of here along Riley Creek, and the saw blade that it had would have looked like that. And it went up and down. It didn't go horizontal, it went up and down. It was stretched in a wooden frame run by water power, and it would go up and down 100 to 120 strokes per minute.
And then the log would be brought through it.
Yeah. And you have saw marks that go straight across the piece of wood, 90 degrees, and there's no arcs.
I think we've now reached the end of our presentation and also the tape, so we should
Still warm?
that is good.